We'll kind of backtrack just a little bit. We'll probably, let's say, we'll give her 15 minutes to give us her spiel. But she is a therapist who deals with PTSD and all of that good stuff, which is not good. But hopefully we can get something out of her. Are you going to call her?
Yep. Her name is Anne.
Anne?
Anne.
Hello, you've reached Spring Lake Counseling Center. Please leave a message and we will get back to you as soon as
Let's try that one more time before it's too late. You don't have to. If you're trying to turn up that.
This is a professional show. we do know.
Welcome to the podcast.
We like to call them voicemails.
Yeah, it's that one right there, Mike.
Thank you.
Hello.
Anne?
Yes.
Hey, Miss Anne, this is Jessica, Gina's friend.
Hello.
Hey, really fast. I actually have you on the air with us. Did she kind of fill you in on why we were calling you?
I have no idea other than I'm talking about PTSD.
Okay, okay. Well, are you...
You're stressing me out right now.
She's going to roll.
Oh, my gosh.
That's
gosh. You need treatment already? You're stressed?
How does that make you feel?
I will call you after the show.
There's a group for that on Wednesdays.
And where are you located?
I am right about a rock's throw away from Fort Bragg as we speak in Spring Lake, North Carolina.
Nice. So you're absolutely zero help to me right now.
We're in Colorado.
I think you just stressed him out even more.
Well, I don't do Colorado. It's too cold there.
Right.
I'm from Maine. So I can say that.
Right. True. Gina and I were talking, and we're actually doing a show today, a podcast on the military and just lots of different topics with that. And I was discussing with her that, we would like to talk about PTSD with military as far, in addition to just PTSD in general. She and I were talking yesterday that a lot of people, don't understand that what military people go through when they come back from war, and they also don't understand that PTSD isn't just exclusive for people who have been in the military. So we thought we'd just bring you on, and we actually have someone who is in the United States Marine Corps in with us as well. So we thought we'd just chat.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
All right.
It's already been done.
No.
So what in your field, what do you find? Do you find that most of your clients have been traumatized by the most? Is it absence of family? Is it the hazing? Is it the experience of going over in war? What are you finding?
Well, gee, I don't know that I can answer that question, honestly. I think
Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day.
Exactly. I mean, so most people, I find that most of the time when people do have that diagnosis, that's not necessarily what they're coming in for. So it tends to come out in other ways. Example, I might have someone come in for marital therapy or a substance abuse issue or some other reason. And through treatment find out that the cause is actually trauma related. But usually that's not the presenting problem, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay. So who actually does the diagnosis of PTSD? Would that be your field or who would?
So yes. So I'm a therapist in private practice. So anyone who works in the mental health field with either a master's degree or a doctorate level is able to provide that diagnosis.
What would be if you had to say that, like the top three key signs of PTSD, what would those be?
Avoidance, hypervigilance would probably be the two that are most prevalent, I would say. Sort of being very on guard, very alert, startle easily, jumpy, avoiding things that are reminders of trauma.
So when you have, because you kind of deal with a whole bunch of different aspects, I'm assuming you work with kids as well, right?
I do not. I actually specialize in adults. PTSD is my specialty, as well as marital therapy, and I deal almost 99% primarily with active duty or dependents of military. Okay.
So if a military person who just came off the field kind of having all these symptoms towards this, what would be your first act to start getting them into recovery?
So once they've hit my office, is that what you're saying, or
Yes.
how would someone else encourage? So there are several very empirically evidence-based treatment modalities. Prolonged exposure, so exposing to something that is a reminder of the trauma to actually get the brain to reprocess it again and become more comfortable with it is one. There's a specific therapy called cognitive processing therapy.
Is that similar to EMDR?
It is not. That is actually the third approach. So
okay.
the three of those. So the three of those are, and I primarily use cognitive processing and prolonged exposure.
Now, how many programs are there available for our vets or someone that has come back from combat? I mean, are we doing enough for these enlisted soldiers or the vets that in your opinion, what needs to be done to help them?
Absolutely not. So there's a large gap in services, and so it's a convoluted system to say the least. One of the biggest barriers that I feel for our current folks that are active is in order to get mental health treatment, they are actually required to go on post. So I work off post. Mm-hmm. So they basically the military wants them to be receiving services in a place that they can be tracked. Which, what does that tend to make people do? Not want to go in for treatment.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Go head right back where the problem started.
Correct. So, so folks that are either retired or medically retired are free to access mental health treatment off post. Folks that are currently active duty have to use a program called Military OneSource, which in essence is supposed to be for folks that are not receiving what we call medical counseling. So, no, I don't think that it's an adequate system. I think there need to be much heavier focus of allowing these individuals to receive care off of the military post. They're afraid of things being documented. They're afraid of chain of command finding out. They're afraid that it's going to impact their livelihood and their career.
So you probably find that a lot of people are afraid to even do anything about it, to even venture out
100%.
For help. And then
Absolutely.
Then you get people who don't get help at all, and they suffer, their families suffer, and sometimes it ends even worse where they take their own life. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do you think there's a stigma? Do you think there's a stigma with this, and that's why they, where does that stigma come from? Why?
Well, if you look at the stigma's been around for a long time, but there is a stigma. I think the Army has taken steps. I say Army just because I'm right here by an Army base, and I'm also a military spouse myself. So forgive me when I say Army, I mean military in general. But I think the military has tried to take steps to reduce the stigma. Maybe it's been reduced a little bit, but it's very prominent. It's still there. So people are afraid to go seek help. They're afraid it's going to impact their career. It's one of the only fields where your boss actually has the right to know whether or not you're seeking mental health treatment. If you work at a bank, your boss doesn't get to know that. You go after hours, and they have no way of knowing. You're in the military; your boss has a right to know that. So,
is there validity to the fear? I mean, what kind of repercussions can someone that's enlisted in the military or as a vet what can they suffer from by going and seeking counseling?
So I think that's going to be dependent on the diagnosis. So potentially, I think there are definitely some measures that can be taken. So, for example, if you are active and are prescribed medication, psychotropic medication, it can be a barrier to deploying. If someone deems that you're not eligible to deploy, then you're then called non-deployable and cannot be non-deployable in the United States military for very long and still have a career. So depending on what diagnosis you're dealing with, I think it's becoming more acceptable for people to go in that are struggling with maybe a low level of depression or something like that. But there definitely are barriers. There are reasons that people don't want to go seek help.
So statistically, how many people have in this statistic sounds like it wouldn't even be correct considering the fact that not everyone that needs help gets help. But as statistics stand now, what do you think as far as percentage or number wise there are of people
answer that.
Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able, and I think it would be so skewed.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
skewed.
I've worked for the military, been employed by the government as also someone who provided services on post and also off post. So I think looking at both sides of the coin, there's just no way to answer that question.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least from my own personal experiences with the people I work with, a lot of people feel guilty. A lot of people feel guilty or ashamed to be the one to go out and ask for help. I don't know if you've experienced that or not, but
absolutely, that's very common. And there's also a lot of, so one of the most common things that I hear is, well, my situation isn't that bad. I know so and so who saw da 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 da. So a lot of maybe my situation isn't as bad as it could have been. Therefore, I'm not worthy, and I feel guilty about having a problem. So a lot of comparing and contrasting, and I think that that's definitely a barrier as well.
In your practice, do you commonly have group sessions?
I do. I actually have a men's PTSD group. Mm-hmm.
So, how many people would normally come?
So the group that I've run, I don't open it to the public for specific reasons. So in order to be part of a group, you'd have to be seen individually, and I'd have to make sure that you'd be a fit. So it's not something that would just be open to the public. There's a difference between, we call them either a closed group, meaning, you have to be sort of accepted in, or an open group, which would be open to the public. And I would not do an open PTSD group.
Right. Is there more progress, in your opinion, when it comes to the group sessions compared to individual therapy?
I don't think there's more. I think both are crucial.
Okay.
So tell us you having the experience and you being inside, having an inside view of all of this, what can we do? What can be done? What needs to be done to try to help these vets more on our level, on a civilian level, as far as voting, whatever the case may be? What can we do? What do you feel needs to be done?
Oh, that's $1 million question.
Pay me later.
Yeah, I honestly, I think looking at length of deployment, and so one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now is just rapid deployment cycles. So coming in and out and in and out and in and out, not giving the brain a chance to calm down, process what's happened. So in my opinion, putting limits on less frequent deployments and shorter deployments.
Okay.
And yes, there has been some legislation that's been passed around that, but it's certainly not something that's, so you might see somewhere, well, they're only allowed to go for X amount of months anymore. Well, that's not necessarily accurate because there's always exclusions. So.
Right, or depending on the political situation at hand.
Absolutely.
Whatever's going on, there's going to be, that was
so,
what we were going to do, but now that we've got this whole, North Korea thing, and we have to.
Yeah, well, it depends, depends on what type of work you're doing and what kind of unit you're attached to. So,
as far as survivor's guilt, do you deal with a lot of
absolutely
military that have a lot of survivor's guilt?
Absolutely. Very common.
How do you really deal with that? You can't just say to someone, hey, you know what, don't feel guilty. You did what you could do and you're still alive and thank goodness. That's certainly, it's nice.
No, you can't. So that's sort of part of, there's actually a 12-session protocol that's part of one of the sessions of survivor's guilt when we look at cognitive processing therapy. So there's an entire session that's dedicated to that. And it's really, so a lot of times what you're going to end up finding is that folks are getting in the realm of I coulda, shoulda, woulda. I could have prevented that so really looking at reprocessing that information. But you're right, telling someone not to feel guilty isn't effective.
Okay, we're gonna kind of wrap it up a little bit, but you said the third protocol is ED or EMDR. I know the process of EMDR. I work with troubled youth on a daily basis that always have to go through that. Can you explain on how that would help with PTSD?
And maybe even just giving, we are here in locally in a Colorado Springs, so there's military. It's a huge military town. If you could get out a message after you explain that, just kind of get